Hi, today we are going to read Chapter 9 of Front Desk by Kelly Yang. Chapter 9 begins on page 44. I walked home by myself after school, looking over my shoulder as I made the crossing from Meadow Lane onto Coast Boulevard. It was like crossing over into a different world. Back at the motel, I dashed to find my parents to tell them the news that Jason Yao was in my class. But as it turned out, they had other problems to worry about. The washing machine in the laundry room was busted. There was water everywhere, and my dad had foam up to his knees. "Quick," he said, pointing to a bucket. "Hand me that." I gave him the bucket. It filled in a matter of seconds, and I dragged it out of the laundry room to the parking lot, watching as the murky water spilled onto the ground like a tidal wave. As soon as it emptied, I took it back to the laundry room. Fill and spill, fill and spill. When the last of the water was emptied and the laundry room was all wiped down, the parents got on the phone with Mr. Yao. I picked up the receiver in my room so I could listen in. "What now?" Mr. Yao barked. "I'm terribly sorry, but we're going to need a new washing machine," my dad said. "What did you do? Did you break it?" Mr. Yao asked, annoyed. "You idiot!" "He's not an idiot," I yelled into the phone. "Mia, get off the phone," my dad said. I said okay and put the phone down on the table for a second, then, very quietly, picked it up again. "You're paying for it, and guess what? They're not cheap," Mr. Yao said. "Mr. Yao, please, be reasonable," my dad pleaded. "I didn't break it. I just got here. I barely even touched it." "Well, you must have done something because now it's broken. And if you want a new washing machine, you're going to have to pay for it," Mr. Yao said before slamming down the phone. My mother was so furious after the call she was shaking. "That man!" she shrieked. But no matter how mad she got, there was no avoiding the fact that we had to get a new washer. Mr. Yao had told my dad right before he got off the phone that it would take several days before it could be delivered. My dad paced back and forth in the living room, trying to figure out how we were supposed to live without a washing machine for so long. Every day, the tower of dirty towels from the customers was as tall as me. "Maybe we could send it out," my dad said, thinking out loud, then quickly shook his head when he thought about how much that would cost. And who would be paying for it? Certainly not Mr. Tightwad. "What if we told people not to use so many towels?" I suggested. Again, my dad shook his head. "We're a motel. We have to have towels," he said. With a sigh, he turned to my mom and said, "We're just going to have to wash them all by hand." My mom groaned. On top of all the other things they had to clean. It didn't take long before the laundry room was teeming with towels. There were piles and piles of them, sitting in buckets, on the floor, hanging on the door. Every time I walked by the laundry room, there seemed to be more of them, like the towels were meeting each other in the laundry room, getting married and having babies. I knew I had to do something, so I went around to all the weeklies and explained the situation. They were all very sympathetic. They vowed to limit their towel usage to 1 towel a day until the next washer arrived. Thanks so much for understanding," I said to Hank. He and Billy Bob were in Hank's room cooking hamburgers on Hank's hot plate. "Not a problem," Hank said, throwing patties onto the pan. They didn't have enough ground beef, so Hank was taking a bunch of saltines and smashing them up. Then he added the ground-up cracker crumbs to the ground beef. I watched as he shaped the crumbling ground beef mixture expertly into more patties. "Wow, it looks just like a real hamburger," I said to Hank. "Oh, sure, it tastes just like one, too," he said, handing me a cooked one. Gingerly, I lifted the saltine burger to my mouth and took a bite. He was right. It tasted just like the real thing, only crunchier. I devoured the burger. "I'm sorry you guys have to pay for the new washer," Hank said, as he threw more patties into the sizzling pan. "Typical Mr. Yao, squeezing us for every last penny." He handed me another saltine burger. As I chewed, I thought about how nice it was that Hank lumped us together with the weeklies rather than Mr. Yao. Despite all our efforts, the mountain of towels continued to grow at an alarming rate. There just wasn't enough time to wash all of them by hand every night. That Sunday, I promised to help my dad knock out a bunch of them. We put them into buckets, filling the buckets with water and dumping them into laundry detergent. Then we sat down and scrubbed them by hand until our fingers turned into raisins. Even then, there were still dozens of dirty towels left. So many, in fact, that we ran out of buckets. We're going to have to go over to the Home Depot and buy more buckets, my dad said, shaking his head. Buckets for $4.99 each. That was more than a Big Mac cost, and we couldn't even afford those. But I had an idea. I grabbed as many of the rest of the dirty towels as I could, and I ran toward one of the empty guest rooms. Follow me, I said to my dad. I headed straight for the bathroom, where I dumped the dirty towels into the bathtub, ran the water, and sprinkled the laundry detergent. But how are we going to scrub them? My dad asked. I grinned at him. I started rolling up my pants legs. As soon as my dad saw that, he smiled and started rolling up his too. We jumped into the tub together, the water sloshing and splashing as the wet towels tickled our toes. We made so much noise jumping and screaming and laughing that my mom came to see what was going on. What are you guys doing? She asked. We froze when we saw her, bracing for a lecture, but when I peeked at her face, I did not find a frown. Scoot over, she said. My mom started rolling up her pants. That afternoon, my parents and I hopped and hopped and hopped, laughing so hard we soon forgot we were washing towels. And that's the end of chapter 9.